the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app here on a Wednesday, where the Commanders practiced in pads yet again. Be joined at the top of the next hour by Nicki, Jhabvala to talk about it. So, Anthony, I did not get the chance to see you at practice today, sir. You did not quite make it out to Ashburn. You would have had a very long trek. Perfectly understandable why you were not present today. But that leaves me with my notepad all by myself. But tomorrow, you might be out there solo. So we're gonna get Anthony's notes tomorrow.
Yes, sir.
Which is exciting. The boss was out there today too, which was fun. I spent some practice with CK. I think you should go grab him out of his office, and we should get the boss's notes from training camp. Hey, what did you see today? Huh? No? Oh, that's my job. It's my job. Okay. Here's what I got from training camp today. It was another day of training camp, and that is ultimately a good thing. I mean, this is not the time of year where you want major stories coming out of your camp. Major stories this year are big injuries, big busts. It is too early in camp to have major successes in terms of, oh, this guy's just, wow. But we are deep enough into camp to, I would say, like, start to have a couple more pins in things. That's the phrase I've been using when Logan and I have been talking about it on Take Command. It's like, I'm going to put a pin in that and come back to it. It's a peg on the whiteboard of something to pay attention to. For instance, if you think back to 2019, like in the spring, you were like, this McLaurin kid's pretty good. He seems to know what he's doing. And by the time you get to this deep in training camp, you're like, that's not a fluke. Like this kid's good. Like Terry's going to wind up being their number one wide receiver. I don't think he's going to play special teams, which is what they drafted him for. Huh. Interesting. So, like, that kind of stuff starts to happen. But outside of that, like, if anything major is happening at this point in camp, it's typically bad, not good. You just haven't stacked enough days. But I also think that, like, no particular side of the ball has been dominant. You've seen growth on both sides of the ball. You see some of the positive things in terms of cohesiveness on the defensive side that you were hoping to see. You see growth in some of the young players. A guy like Cole Turner, who you'll hear from later in the show. It was his day at the podium. Like, he's made a bunch of plays. Logan Thomas has made a bunch of plays. And actually, the number one takeaway from camp, Anthony, is that there's a whole bunch of plays. They ran 100 plays today. 100 plays. It was a long practice. It was a 2.5-hour practice today, which is the longest they've gone. And you have to make it a certain number of days in before you're even allowed to go that long because they want to safely ramp up the guys. And they've made it to that point. But it's also like the tempo of practice. You have the referees there today, and there's this hilarious moment where Bieniemy's yelling at the referees to get the hell out the way. They're trying to huddle up and make a call, and it's like, yo, we got 2.5 hours. We want to run 100 plays. Y'all got to move. Like, we don't have time for you to have a powwow right now. You're not actually in control of this. This is not a game. This is a practice. Not a game. It's practice. This is our place. We're in charge. Move. And so to see the amount and quality of work that is being done is still like my biggest takeaway from camp so far. And I think that's a great thing. Would it be incredible if Sam Howell was out there just dicing dudes? Every single snap, he's making plays, balls out, always on time, everything's on target. He was doing like crazy, I don't know what Chiefs camp looks like, but that was happening, whatever Mahomes does. Can you imagine what it would have been like to be like Mahomes' first camp? And you're like, what is this alien dude out here? Can't do that. Turns out you can. But it would be great if Howell was doing that stuff, but he's not. He's making a ton of like solid plays, balls out on time most of the time. Not a ton of sacks. You are getting a couple, but some of those are in like blitz periods that you're expecting. Or hey, John Allen, Deron Payne, they win. These are all pro players, or Pro Bowl players, all pro caliber players. So you're just going to see that sometimes. But I think, Anthony, like, I don't know if I'm missing anything from what you've seen on Twitter, what you've seen when you've been out there talking to people, but like, This is like so far so good on being a pretty basic, straightforward professional training camp in all aspects. And frankly, the biggest story is that they got bleachers and they're full every day.
Yeah, I mean, on top of the bleachers, this is more so just, I don't know. I think it's just everything points back to the renewed energy, and it has everything to do with, new ownership. At the end of the day, they talk about, fans, coming out. They necessarily didn't give up on the team, and there's just a new profound like sense of, faith that they have ever since everything changed. So I think that's more so just what it points to. And then the fact that you bring in EB and he's, had his imprint all over practice, I think he's like one of the big storylines when you talk about practice, just because of who he is, where he's coming from, and everyone, understanding that having seen and, done it his way, it's resulted in some good things for some of his previous teams. So I think that's more so what it is.
100%. And like the ownership is the biggest story around this team right now. And like you said, the renewed sense of hope, the renewed sense of purpose, the renewed fan base, the folks that just straight up stayed away because they didn't want to give Dan Snyder money. And there was a lot more of those folks than I think people realize, maybe even that we realize. But I think on the field, like, it's hard to overstate what Bieniemy's meant to this team. Just in terms of how they operate, whether it works out or not, like we're not going to know till September, October, and then certainly November, December, and January. But in terms of process and literally what we see when we go out there, Bieniemy and the way they've changed things is tremendous. And, I asked John Allen about it today when John was at the podium, and he's like, look, for the Alabama guys, like we're used to this. We run a ton of plays. We're running quickly. Like everything's on time in terms of the tempos and in between plays. There's no lollygag. Like this is how we have been built. But for some guys, maybe it is something new. And I'll say this, like for the team, this is new. And I think it's ultimately going to pay off both in a like running this many plays and getting this many reps and organizing practice this way. One, helps your conditioning, like it just does, and hopefully that will lead to a sharper start of the season because guys aren't going to get tired as quickly. They'll be mentally sharper. They'll be physically faster, quicker, all that kind of good stuff. But also, you just had more time. If I tell you have to do something, you can practice it 5 times, you can practice it 10, you'd probably take the practicing 10. And so I think that element of just literally getting more reps and getting more experience and a thorough knowledge of what it is that your assignment is in any particular situation is phenomenal. There's just basic like human level thing that a school teacher would understand because that's their job is to teach. That is at play here, and it's really cool to see. It's very different. It feels very different. Obviously they've had people who have been successful here in other places on varying levels. Your Grudens, your Turners, your whoever. Obviously, Rivera's run things a bunch of different ways over the course of his career, and so is Del Rio, by the way. Like they've done this kind of thing before. I just wonder if they've had this level what was the level of success? Ultimately, you have to play to your coaches and how they want to do things and your players. But for a guy like EB to come in and dictate like this is how it's going to be done, and for everyone to get along and be on board and the buy-in. That's your big takeaway from a week into camp. And also the fact that there's just not a lot of position battles. Like we're kind of know where the depth chart is. And in fact, we're going to put that to the test next. Over the next half hour, we'll go offense first, then the defense. Or Anthony, let's go actually due to time, the way the segments pan out. This next segment will be a little shorter than the 4:30. Let's do defense next, offense at 4:30. And we're going to go 1 to 10 confidence on who do we know the starter at every given position? Obviously, we'll talk about some of the battles for some of those numbers that are lower, but do we feel 1 to 10 level confident in knowing who the starters are for the Commanders on offense and defense? We'll go through it all. Next, it's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. The Hoffman
So
Show.
good.
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And apparently coming out of break, sometimes we play Sweet Caroline. Any particular impetus for that, producer Anthony Haney?
No real reason.
Okay.
Curveball.
Curveball.
Gotta throw one per show.
Yep. Oh, I looked silly. Swing and a miss by the host again. All right. Off we go. All right. So here's the exercise I want to do. We think a lot of the Commanders starters. Obviously, there's some spots at the end of the roster that are up for grabs, but I think that we have a pretty good handle on who is going to be the starters for this team. There are a couple of positions where things are up for grabs. So let's put it to the test. Offense, defense. Who are the starters in place right now, and what is our confidence level that they will be the starter week 1? We're going to start on the defensive side, where things are pretty easy across the front four, right? Montez Sweat, 10 out of 10. John Allen, 10 out of 10. Deron Payne, 10 out of 10. Chase Young, 10 out of 10. Now, of course, there's always risk of injury. That is the nature of the NFL. So we're not putting injury into this unless there's a guy, like there's one on the offensive side of the ball where he missed practice today hurt and he's been injured a ton. And so that's allowed to factor in. But if you, for whatever reason, are like, Chase Young, I still don't trust the knee, because you're definitely Chase Young's doctor, and you're like, it's only an 8 out of 10 for me. Like, we're not counting that. I mean, I guess it can be for you, but for me, it's 10 out of 10. Chase Young is going to be the starter in week 1. I do think linebacker's interesting. I feel, let's call it 9 out of 10 confident, 9.5, 9.8 out of 10, that Cody Barton is going to start at middle linebacker. The question that I have is when they get into their sub packages, is Barton or Davis the guy that's going to be on the field as the main guy? And we'll get to Davis more in a second. Barton has had a nice camp. He had a pick in one-on-ones today, at least one. It was funny because they kind of hid it from us. They had 3 drills going at once at one point with O-line, D-line, wide receivers, DBs, working in like cluster type of stuff. So it was like 3-on-3s. And then the offensive line, it was actually one of the, I'd never seen this drill before that I can remember. I guess Callahan does it when I was talking to Logan about it. But it's an O-line drill, and so it's like 3-on-2 kind of situation, and you get to work on your combination blocks, but the D-line wasn't like, I'm going to try to bust this up, because there's no running back to chase. So while that was happening, the running backs and linebackers were doing one-on-ones. Barton had a nice play. Overall, I mean, I was trying to watch 3 things at once, and this was the one I watched the least of because it was farthest away, but it looked like the linebackers had a very, very nice session against the tight ends and the running backs. Anyway, Davis is a former first rounder. He played very well last year. He is fast as hell and covers a lot of space. But is Barton, who is also fast, got good speed, and good recognition, is he the guy that winds up being the Mike green dot, only linebacker, one linebacker on the field, it's him guy? I think that's probably my slight favorite at the moment, but definitely like in their base defense or their nickel defense where there's two linebackers, I feel very, 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 very confident that Cody Barton will be one of them.
Yeah, I agree with Cody Barton. Again, he was brought in, I think, to play middle linebacker, and I think that's where they necessarily see fit. But yeah, the sub package is interesting because Jamin Davis, everyone talks about how fast he is, his speed and things of that nature, and how versatile of a defender he can be. But I don't necessarily know. I mean, it is early in camp, and he has been getting beat a little bit, but my best bet would be to say he starts out there, and that he's given that role in the sub packages. But for the most part, we'll definitely see Cody Barton.
Yeah. So that gets to Davis at the weak side linebacker spot. I would guess that there's also probably like a role in like goal line run stuffing situations for David Mayo. That's his jam, and he's real good at it. He first run play yesterday, it was first or second, he shot through the line and just murdered the back. And you're like, oh, it's David Mayo's period. There's a reason they've kept him around. But Davis is going to be the guy. But I can only put it at a 9 because, like, I hate to say this, but because it's very serious and completely non-football. This court date tomorrow for Jamin Davis is huge. Like, they do not play with reckless driving in Virginia, and he was going 114 and a 45, I think, and like, already had this would be his. It's not his second, but it's because he pleaded down another one, where it would have been reckless, and it just became a whatever the charge below reckless is. Like a couple months before the incident that he's on trial for, I don't know, it's technically on trial, has a court date for tomorrow. And Davis had agreed to a plea deal of 8 days of jail time, which could have been deferred to the offseason. I don't know the details of it, but the judge rejected it. So all of a sudden, Jamin Davis is like convicted of reckless driving, which is a misdemeanor, but in Virginia still carries potentially significant jail time. Like, unless they suspend his sentence and agree to do it in the offseason, like, there is, I can't believe I'm about to say this, but like, there is a chance Jamin Davis misses football games because he's in jail for driving too fast. I know that seems crazy, but that's the reality of where we could be headed with this. I'm sure his lawyers, which I'm sure are very, very good lawyers, are going to fight, even if there is like 30 days in jail, for it to be a suspended sentence for after the football season. And I can't imagine that a judge would reject that. They will probably suspend his license. Like, he won't be able to drive. You know, there'll be a lot of stipulations on it. But because that is looming, I'm going to put it at a 9 out of 10 for Jamin. But for football, if it was purely football, that would be a 10 out of 10 that he will get the start. And then, you know, how do they rotate? We'll see from there. Emmanuel Forbes, 9.5 out of 10. Feel very, very confident that he's going to start. It just doesn't feel right to say he's a 10 out of 10 and that's the same as John Allen, right? Like, is there a chance that BSJ and Fuller start in a base 2-corner defense? I can't rule it out, although I would think it's unlikely and that Forbes is going to be the guy. I have seen nothing yet that would suggest otherwise, both in how they are actually rotating it. Like, he is still CB1, it seems, on the depth chart. He's a first rounder. He's only going to get better, and his play has been good. But, like, St. Juste has been really good, and so has Fuller. So you got 3 guys. So I guess it's a 9.5 in that way. But he's going to be the guy. I'm not trying to be controversial radio guy. We'll put it at 9.8, 98% chance. Fuller on the other side, same thing, 9.8. And then the slot position's the one where I don't even know how to talk about it. Because, like, Wild Goose is going to play some. St. Juste is going to play some. Curl is going to play some. Quan Martin is going to play some. But who's going to be the actual first guy? I don't know. This is a stupid game that we came up with, Anthony. Why did we do this to ourselves?
I blame you.
That is a good person to blame because it's my fault.
Yeah. The slot position, that's the toughest position. But we have seen, as you've already mentioned, 4 or 5 guys play there. And we've seen Cam Curl, have some really good plays in the slot position. So if I think
here's what I would say. I feel 10 out of
there.
10 out of 10 BSJ is going to be the guy.
10 out of 10.
In the slot. I guess 9.8 because there's a chance he's outside, and I put 9.8 on all those guys. So I'll put BSJ at 9.8, right? I would say 10 out of 10 confident that Quan Martin is going to get snaps there in both a Buffalo and a regular nickel role. It's hard. What's the difference at that point, right? If he's in there. I feel 10 out of 10 confident that Cam Curl will play some there. And I feel like 8 out of 10 confident that Rashad Wildgoose will also have some packages there. He has been on the field a lot, and he has done well. And I know people's first impression of him was terrible because he got put in a really bad spot last year and did not perform well in whatever early game that was that he got cooked. Mm-hmm. But he finished the year strong. He's had a really good spring, and he's been very, very good in training camp. And so I do think that there will be packages for whatever reason, whether they like the coverages when he's in there and in certain roles or man-to-man or certain types of receivers. Like Rashad Wildgoose is going to play some nickel for this team. And frankly, he's going to play some outside for this team and kick other guys inside. It seems like, they might like him in man-to-man situations because I've seen him like outside with, other guys that you would expect to be outside inside. And, if they're just matched up, maybe that's it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that to me is those are the 4 guys that will get that position. And then Curl and Forrest, 10 out of 10, they're starting in the safeties.
Where would you have Danny Johnson perhaps getting any of those slot cornerback reps?
Not right now. Okay. I think Danny will make the team. Yeah. That would be my guess. But again, we're trying to do this exercise for starters. Unless there's injury, I don't think that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, you're right.
And not even just starters. It's first string. I don't think there's any situation where there's a package that Danny is the first option for. Yep. So that'd be my answer to that. But I do think he'll be around, and I feel comfortable with him in an emergency filling in any spot. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Okay, coming up next, same exercise, but the offense, which includes the biggest position battle on the team. That's next on the Team 980. Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Going through the Commanders' depth chart, how much confidence do we have in each position? Do we know the starter? Do we know the first stringer? That is what we are trying to figure out. On defense, the answer is pretty much yes across the board. The biggest questions are Jamin Davis's looming legal issues with the reckless driving charge in Virginia, and just which of the three corners will line up where. But we're pretty confident that it'll be Forbes and Fuller on the outside with BSJ on the inside, and then lots of rotation in that slot depending on the sub package, Buffalo nickel, whatever other versions of nickel they have, etc. Maybe they should have one called the Buffalo nickel. They should have like a ranch nickel. They should have it's a wing joke, Anthony. Thanks for playing.
I picked up on it.
Thanks. It helps if you laugh. Even if it's not funny, my ego doesn't take a shot. Helps if you laugh in the microphone, which I see you laughing right now, so that the audience can hear it. Yeah.
My apologies.
Yeah. So offensively, let's go through it. Let's do the quarterback first. Are you 10-10 on Hal?
I am 9.035 on Hal. I think there's a 90% chance he's our day one starter.
I'll go slightly high. I'm like a 9.3.
Okay.
Like,
so you just wanted to
I'm pretty sure, but I wouldn't want to bet my life on it.
Yeah.
And obviously, coming up at 6 o'clock, we have our training camp pick 6 at 6. But Ron was asked about Howell today, and he's like, don't forget about Brissett. And, like, coaches play stupid games where they try to create – it's not drama, but they try to, quote-unquote, create competition. And I feel like that's what's happening. But just in case. And Jacoby's looked pretty good. And not that Sam hasn't. Sam has also looked good. And at that point, you bet on the upside. But just in case, 9-3 on Sam. Running back, Robinson, 10 out of 10. Gibson will have a role. Rodriguez will have a role. Jonathan Williams is having yet another good camp. All that dude does is just practice well in front of media, and then we're all left like, why doesn't that guy get any more? Don't they like him? Isn't he good? And then you're like, yeah, don't ask me. I think he's pretty good. He can just run the football really well. But like, I was talking to someone today about this. Jonathan Williams is the kind of guy that is the reason why NFL running backs have a problem with their contracts, because you could put Jonathan Williams anywhere in the NFL, and if he's behind a good offensive line, he'll get 4.2 a carry. If he's behind a bad offensive line, he'll get 3.8 a carry, and he's the fourth guy in Washington. Like, that tells you what kind of surplus there is at the running back position. It's just a market issue. But Robinson, to me, is actually one of the stories of camp. Like, he has come in tremendous shape. He is long, he is lean, he is powerful. He is fluid athletically. He's showing so much more in the pass game than we ever thought he was capable of. So I feel incredibly confident in Robinson being not just like the obvious day one starter, but it's not really even a 1A, 1B situation with Gibson. Gibson's, again, going to have his role and his touches, and they'll rotate, but like Robinson's the guy. As he should be. He's great.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with you. And again, as he already alluded to it, it's sort of going to be like a night and day thing with his production this season. Again, he said he was like limping practically all last year.
Right.
And, he's had a couple of months to, fully heal and, rest and get ready for his second season. So I think he's going to come back better than ever. And if we weren't impressed with what he did last year as a, injured guy, it's only, the sky's the limit for the guy when he's fully healthy.
For sure. All right, wide receivers. McLaurin, 10 out of 10. Dotson, 10 out of 10. Samuel, 10 out of 10. And I feel 9 out of 10 that Diami's the fourth guy. Obviously, when there'll be different formation or different alignments and whatever where they rotate guys, and we'll see who else is going to make, be in the mix for heavier snaps. But that position's set all good there. Um, tight end, Logan Thomas. I actually think he's a 10 out of 10. Like, he is clearly the best guy. And that doesn't mean there won't be a rotation and a lot of snaps for John Bates, and especially when they go heavier stuff and are trying to run or give run looks. I think Cole Turner's had a fantastic camp so far. He's made a bunch of plays over the last 2 days. Had a bunch of catches today. But I just think Logan is the most polished, and he's a playmaker, and it's the kind of thing that there's going to be a lot of people eating crow that were like, when are they going to cut Logan Thomas this offseason? And it's like, why do you want to cut him? What are you going to go spend that money on? A replacement for Logan Thomas? He's good. And he's looked really – I hope that continues to him for him during the season, because in camp he's looked excellent. 10 out of 10. He's the starter.
I agree. 10 out of 10. I think Cole Turner next year will be that guy.
I don't feel super confident in that, because I do think that's like a position that you could go address in free agency, draft, whatever, if you wanted to upgrade there in the offseason. But Turner's definitely shown some flashes. We'll see. That is a position sometimes where guys just like emerge. Like you think of Dallas Goedert. It's like, oh, who's the backup to Zach Ertz? This Goddard kid seems like he's got something. All of a sudden you're like, whoa, is that dude a top 5 tight end in the NFL?
Yeah.
That kind of thing happens. Maybe Cole Turner is that. That would be awesome. Then you get to the O-line. Right tackle, Andrew Wiley, 10 out of 10. He's your starter. No one else has pushed him. He's been perfectly fine. Right guard, Sam Cosmi, emerging star potentially, like 10 out of 10. He's your guy. Nick Gates. I'm going to go 9 out of 10 on Gates. Here's why. As the Rooster has crowed about, there's been some snapping issues on occasion. Nothing catastrophic yet, but he's had a couple of high snaps. He's been mostly very good as a blocker, and he shows a nastiness and a physicality and all the things that he was hyped up to be. But Ricky Stromberg's looked fine. He's a third-round pick. Does it get to a point where you just go, like, this guy's upside is worth it? I think it's at least on the remote possibilities. And I will say, well, we established that we're not doing a ton with injuries here. Gates does have an injury history, so if you're asking like true confidence level, saying 9 out of 10 is giving him a lot of credit based off the injury history, but hopefully he's past all that. He's put in a lot of work. I like Nick Gates and what he brings a lot, but is it as locked in as other positions based on all of those factors? I'll go 9 out of 10.
I'll go 9 out of 10 as well. I have liked what I've seen out of Ricky Stromberg. Granted, I only saw him one day in pads, and I think pads determines a lot more in the trenches.
For sure.
So I'm looking forward to, going out there looking at how the rest of his camp goes. But I like what I see from the rookie.
Yeah, and he's a third-round pick. Like, that's not unheard of. Like, if you had told me the 2 days before the draft they were going to draft a starter at center in the third round, I would have been like, cool, sign me up. And then Gates had a good spring, and he's emerged as the clear front runner, but 9 out of 10. Currently, here's your big one. Currently, your left guard LG1 is Sadiq Charles. Sadiq missed practice today with a calf injury. He has not been particularly good. He has gotten better, but this is a guy whose injury history is long. His consistency is 0. And Chris Paul just looks better by the day. I am going to go 3 out of 10 on Sadiq Charles, which means that I am 7 out of 10 on Chris Paul, meaning I actually am picking the guy who is currently LG2 to win that job.
I think the fact that you pointed out Sadiq Charles' injury history and the fact that he's, missing practice due to a calf injury, I'm saying, man, if you're in a position battle, you have to be out there on the field. Availability is the best ability, and if you're not, making strides in practice, it's going to be hard to, like, outright win, the battle that you're having right now. And, yes, Chris Paul has looked good. So, Sadiq, man.
You got to get out there, buddy.
Out there.
Got to get out there, man. Apparently he's a really good kid. Hope that it works out for him. But I'm going to say Chris Paul is the favorite for that job, right? The the Hoffman show favorite for that job right now. Last position is left tackle, Charles Leno, 10 out of 10, done and dusted. Nicki Jhabvala at 5 o'clock talking about all of this and more with us. Anthony, we got a mystery box next, right? We don't really have anything written down at this time.
We don't.
Sometimes
I think I have something.
Oh, Anthony producing the show live next. If that doesn't get you to keep your radio dial right where it is, I don't know how to do it. So we'll see where Anthony takes the show next. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980 on YouTube at the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app.
Here's what.
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Nicki, Jhabvala, Washington Post, are going to join us coming up at the top of the hour. Right now, old Jerry's been talking. What do you know? Jerry Jones talking at Cowboys camp, a tradition unlike any other. And he made some comments, Anthony, that you saw that have been making some waves. What did old Jerry say, the old owner and general manager of the Dallas Cowboys, say that's got people in a tizzy?
Yeah, so good old Jerry. He was on 96.7 The Ticket, and he was talking about what he's excited about with the Cowboys' offensive changes. And he said it's going to be Dak friendly. He's going to have an offensive line that is going to be able to protect him better. Their spacing is narrower, which is conducive to protection. He's going to have more opportunities to dump the ball off to the backs. He's going to have less to do before the snap and less to read after the snap. The receivers are going to be less dependent upon reading the D-back and Dak reading the D-back. It's going to be more about being at a spot where they should be and the combination of all of it. All of his adjustments, not dramatic changes. When you combine it all, then I'm confident that we're going to be excited about how it protects Dak and how it actually helps efficiency for Dak.
Huh?
Said the same thing, man. Said the same thing.
What?
Dak friendly.
Dak?
Dak friendly.
So, big picture. Man, my brain hurts. I am so... Dog, there was a point in my life when I was working down there. Part of my job was to decipher Jerry quotes. You just read them, and you listen to them, and you're just like, eh? Big picture, the idea that you'd have something that is quarterback friendly is smart. And especially if you have a franchise guy that you want to build around, like you want to surround him with the right types of receivers. And you also want to play to his strengths, which is like a deeper level of understanding of, some guys read the right side of the field better than the left. Like, I know that sounds crazy, but like, if you take the snap and you open up and like the right side of the field, if you're a right-handed quarterback, is ahead of you versus needing to look back over your left shoulder, like sometimes your vision is cleaner one way or the other. Or, I don't know, maybe you're right-eyed or left-eyed, and in 100 years, that's something scientists will understand better. And right now, we're just like, I don't know, I see. Like, who knows what it is? But like, there's all these little intricacies and idiosyncrasies that quarterbacks have, and building an offense to accentuate the ones that you realize are strengths and minimize the ones that are weaknesses are all good. I think there's also an element in there. I'm not going to make you reread the whole quote because I think everyone would drive off of whatever, road they're driving on right now. But there's an element in there of like what is just good modern NFL offense, where you are perhaps less concerned about coverages and more concerned about where individual defenders are. Because if you spend too much time trying to figure out what the coverage is itself, now that there's a lot of like, match zones and, hybrid coverages, things like cover 6, where it's quarters on one side and half on the other, but it's not even just quarter, half. It's like quarter, half with matching. And so guys are just, it's amoeba defense. You're just trying to cover men and space. And Matt Ryan talked about this with us on Take Command. He's like, it got to a point with some of these defenses where I was just like, I don't care what coverage it is. I know I need to read that safety. And if he goes to the left, I throw it to the right. And if he goes right, I throw it to the left. And it sounds like maybe some of that, from what Jerry said, has made its way into the Cowboys offense and how they read it out. But I will say, Jerry getting on the radio and being like, yeah, we've got tighter splits for better protection. These are the kinds of things you shouldn't say into microphones. Like, I don't think that like Logan and I would get on Take Command and say things like that so freely for fear that we would be violating the Commander's media policy on giving opponents a competitive edge. And Jerry just willy-nilly was like, here's how we're going to protect Dak. Okay, buddy. Every advantage you take creates a disadvantage somewhere else. Thanks for letting us know ahead of time. I mean, with that said, though, like, how many people actually believe Jerry Jones? Like, I feel like most people just hear Jerry quotes and they're like, whatever, dude. Tell us if it's something like business of the NFL, maybe I'll listen. Like when Jerry was like, Dan might be in some trouble. You're like, oh, okay, now you have my attention. When it comes to Jerry talking football, I think most people just around the NFL, and especially like other teams, they just roll their eyes. Like, I don't think Ron Rivera's like, we got the Cowboys game plan now. It's like, oh, the old guy's yabbering again.
I mean, even Mike McCarthy, Jared seems to believe that the door for Ezekiel Elliott to make a return to Dallas is not closed. But Mike McCarthy went against him and said, it very much is. So I don't know. Jerry can't even, seem to be on the same page as his own head coach.
I think Jerry likes to keep doors open. I think Jerry is like a, you never know kind of guy. And Mike McCarthy's like, yeah, we're not interested. What Zeke does is not good for us. Yeah. That's why we got rid of him. So see ya. And Jerry's like, I don't know. He's a good kid. I really like him. We stood by him through a lot. Is this a good Jerry Jones or a terrible Jerry Jones?
Today was not that good, but you've had better.
Yeah, I think I captured the essence, which is really the most important thing.
Yep.
Just an old gunslinger. All right, we get back. Nicki Jhabvala. She's smart, and she doesn't sound like Jerry Jones. the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. 1 hour from now, our training camp pick 6 at 6, the 6 most interesting things from training camp on this Wednesday. Half hour from now, we'll do Never Read the Comments. But right now, 5 o'clock means it's time to talk about the top story of the day, which, of course, is training camp with someone who was there. And I know she was there because I was standing next to her for like half the practice. All right, it's time for Not My Beat. My pleasure to welcome in Nicki Jhabvala. Nicki, how are you? Hopefully still as well as you were this morning.
I am good. I thought you were going to, source that or something. I was kind of hoping you would source it, that you stood next to me.
Sources say that she was at practice.
Sources
say I was also there. Sources say we were in the same general vicinity. No, yes. I like general on the record statements where they can apply with names attached. That's
I get that. Yeah.
It's the dream. We don't get to live that dream very often as reporters, but
right.
it's the dream. So when we were walking off the practice field, I kind of jokingly turned to you and was like, "Oh, there it goes, another day of practice in the books. That's fairly nondescript and in some ways that's good." And it's like, okay, cool, like check the box. But we have had enough of these nondescript days that there's a week's worth of data to look at. So as you think of training camp so far, has anything emerged that you find particularly interesting through these 8 days?
I'd say the most interesting, and this is not just because I wrote about it for a story that may or may not go up on the Washington Post tomorrow morning, it's truly just the structure of practice. I remember in recent years, not to make, strong comparisons to the previous regime, but the practices were pretty dead. And granted, these are, there weren't a ton of fans at camp, but, there was more standing around. It wasn't as much movement. It wasn't as intense. This is totally different now. This is the Chiefs' practices. This is what we're watching. I mean, they use both fields. They're constantly moving. There's always a focus for the day, be it red zone, third down, goal line, whatever. They have a set number of, like they did before, they have a set number of periods, and, they'll run through those. But this is a different level of intensity. I talked to Logan Thomas after, and you know how they have the tracking devices on their back, right, where it tracks.
Just for the audience, real quick, Nicki, I'll interject just to explain for those that don't, because while I know it, they might not. So there's a GPS tracking device that they literally stick in the shoulder pads, and it tracks everything, not just like your GPS watch might when you go for a run that says like, oh, this guy ran X amount of miles today, but it also actually gives them based off of they can go back with like timestamps and be like, okay, based off our practice script, we're running this period at this time, and this guy reached X miles per hour and did this amount of high-speed running. So there's a tremendous amount of data that comes out of these chips.
Right. But on the most basic level, it shows, how much distance you traveled, how many steps you put in, basically.
Right.
Well, Logan said, typically last year and years past, you would put in around 4,500 yards. He wouldn't give me a specific number, but he just kind of laughed and was like, it's a little bit over that now. And it's, it doesn't take a scientist to figure out why. They're constantly moving. And then you throw in kind of the nuts and bolts of the offense with the pre-snap motion, the quick game. These guys are going to be in good shape for the start of the season, which is what you want, obviously, but it's especially what you want for later in the season, to go into this, to be fresh in the fourth quarters, to, you hope, be healthier throughout the season. To me, it's all positive going in.
100%. And it has been really fascinating to talk to guys about this and about the practice structure. And I think there's so many different parts of it. I don't know which parts you wrote about. Obviously, we'll find out when we read your story in the Washington Post.
You'll have to read it on the Washington Post, yeah.
WashingtonPost.com/sports for Nicki's work. But the other interesting thing on top of kind of the tempo is they're in these periods forever. Like I don't ever remember a training camp period with 20 minutes on the clock. I don't know if you talked to
Yeah.
anybody about that or you just have your
I
own
did.
thoughts.
That's part of it.
But
Is like how they're.
Yeah. What do you make and what did they make of these longer extended periods?
Yeah, and this is something that they wanted to do after last season, and it's a focus of the enemies, but also Del Rio's. Is, they felt like they bounced too quickly from period to period, so now they focus longer on like their action periods, and they have a narrower focus within those periods. So like they'll do 9-on-7, but it'll be 9-on-7 with a focus on third down, and they'll go third and short, third and medium, third and long, and so on. So they have more time, so they can really dive into the details and really get extra reps doing that, which of course adds more to their plate physically and conditions them as part of this. But that's the thinking behind it, which is good. I mean, I think what was missing a lot in recent years was the basic teaching. There wasn't as much of a focus on the details of not just the system and the offense, but the small things of the game in general. And this new structure focuses more on that. And then you just kind of throw in EB's personality and you get a healthy dose of it all around.
Yeah, Nicki Jhabvala is with us from the Washington Post. You've had, obviously you've been here for a number of years now, but before that you covered the Broncos and you had some national gigs as well. Is this comparable to most other camps, to rarely just the Chiefs? How many other camps that you've seen and been around look similar to what they are doing versus looking more similar to what they've done in the past?
I'd say there's variation across the board. This is very similar to a Kubiak style practice where you're just constantly moving. No second is wasted. Keep moving, keep working. Kubiak's first year, they won a Super Bowl, so I felt like he was probably doing something right, and Andy Reid's won a couple, so he's doing something right. I think past years, I remember my first year on the beat, John Fox was still the coach in Denver, and they were much less intense. And it was a big issue for Peyton. He did not like that, and he's very, as you might have seen, rather controlling, very A-type. So, he wanted a more intense practice. And, then Kubiak came in, and he got it, and they won. So there you go.
There you go.
So there's variation.
Yeah, for sure. But the intensity and intentionality seem to be things that work. And no matter how many plays you run in a given practice. What have you made of Howell through a week?
Yeah, I think he's probably much in line with what you'd expect for somebody with his experience level. I think he's done a lot of really good things, a lot of impressive things. I think he's got a pretty good command. See what I did there?
I did.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think he plays with confidence. He's got the mobility, obviously. It's hard to fully gauge what he is now because he's playing against a defense that pretty much kind of knows what they're going to do. So I'll be curious what he looks like, even going against the Ravens in those joint training camp practices and certainly even in preseason. But I think he showed a lot of good things. He showed a lot of the reasons why they want to really give him this chance this year. But he's also young, and you're going to make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes at any age, but especially when you haven't seen the volume of, opponents and tape that, many other quarterbacks have seen. So there have been times where it's been up and down, but I think on the whole, it's been pretty positive.
I agree, which is why I found it kind of interesting that Ron went out of his way to Keim's question this morning to be like, hey, don't forget about Jacoby Brissett. And it's like, yeah, we haven't forgot. He's just the backup, right? What did you make of Ron kind of interjecting Brissett into a Howell adjacent question?
Oh, he always says that he does it purposely for motivational purposes.
Do you think that works though? Or is it just a silly thing coaches convince themselves that works? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think the players are hanging on every word of Ron's press conferences post-practice, but, yeah. But that's something he's done in the past.
No, he does. And I wonder, sometimes Ron can't help himself with honesty. Sometimes Ron can't help himself in, I don't no, if I spent time, I could say this in a nicer way, but I'm just going to say it the way that it's in my head. Sometimes Ron can't help himself but to be like a movie character high school football coach.
Yes,
and it's
very much
like,
like
that is kind of one of those things where it's like, I don't think anybody's fooled by this, including Sam Howell, but sure, throw Jacoby in
But
there.
there are so many things within the NFL that are like that, right?
Yes,
like
100%.
Don't film anything in practice because, Bill Belichick might see what you're doing on special teams and beat you with it. Like, really? I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
But there's so many things like that,
That would be, Anthony, put this in the rundown for like next July when we have time. Like, let's Nicki and I can spend an hour just totally bitching and moaning about all the silly things NFL people do.
Many silly things.
I think it'll be good for us to get it off of our chests. Nicki Jhabvala is with us from the Washington Post for a few more minutes here for Not My Beat on the Hoffman Show. I mean, defensively, Nicki, this unit has been as advertised, which is not exactly what's happened the past couple of camps. Are you confident that they can carry the continuity and the high-level play and everything that we've seen so far into the regular season?
I think they're built to, certainly. I think the one thing that really stands out, I mean, yes, you got the 4 first-round picks up front, and those guys are beasts. They're really freaking good and big. But I like the depth and the versatility of the secondary. They got guys that can move all around. It's not just, Cam Curl and one other veteran. They got young guys, and they got a foundation that can last for years. And they truly can move around because they do it every play. I mean, they're rotating constantly back there. And I just think, that can only help you. I mean, some of their weaknesses on defense have been, because of the back end, giving up the 40-yard plays or whatever. But when you got that stout pass rush and you can seal it on the back end, I mean, that's what every defense wants. And I think this defense, again, could be relied upon to, close out some games for them. So I think they're built well.
I will try to think of a fun question so we don't have to end on this note, but I do have to ask. How, I don't know, nervous is the right word. How concerned should we be about this court hearing for Jamin Davis tomorrow?
I think it's possible Thursday's court hearing is more of a status hearing to schedule something else in the future. It's possible they could pull together another plea agreement or they set a date for a trial. But I think at this point it seems pretty likely that he is going to have to serve some time in jail. The original sentence was 30 days, and he appealed that guilty conviction. He pled not guilty, but was convicted. He appealed that, reached a plea deal for a maximum of 8 days, and the judge rejected it, saying that's too light. So I think it's pretty likely that whether it's a plea deal or a trial, that he could be. It seems pretty likely he could be facing time.
And is that the kind of thing that do you think they'll get suspended till after the season? Like, what's the chances that he misses time this year because he is in jail for reckless driving?
Yeah, I mean it's possible. I would imagine if this drags into the season and then the sentencing comes up in season, they would try to push it down the road. But you never know. I mean, it depends on, the terms that are agreed upon in the next plea agreement, if that's what they go for, or the sentencing that a jury comes up with. So I believe the original sentence, the 30-day one, it allowed him to defer to after the season, but he appealed that. So it's honestly no telling with what they agree upon next.
Nicki Jhabvala, Washington Post with us. All right, here's the best I can do for a silly, lighten the mood question on the way out. Level of 1 to 10, your panic on the fact that Tress Way dropped a field goal hold today. Has Tress lost his magic?
To be fair, it wasn't a great snap. But no, don't ever suggest that Tress lost his magic.
That's the correct answer.
That's like telling a kid that Santa Claus isn't real. You can't do that. No, that's ridiculous.
No, Tress is still his magical.
No.
Cameron
good.
Cheeseman, how dare you have Tressway look bad? I mean,
Yeah,
what
Cheese has gotta get it together.
a
Yeah.
sin that is.
I know. That is not trust. Like, don't even put that. Don't even
I
put that
apologize.
thought
You know
out
what? That's
there.
on me. That's 100% on
Come
me.
on, Greg.
Sorry, Tressway. Cameron Cheeseman, we need to have a discussion. All right, Nicki, great to hang out the last couple of days. I will see you next week. Continue to enjoy training camp. Another day where hopefully nothing major happens, because nothing good major happens this time of year.
Correct.
I'll talk to you. Thank you, ma'am.
All right. See ya.
That is Nicki Jhabvala, everybody. Washington Post. I'm very much looking forward to reading her reporting on the periodization of practice. That is very much up my alley in terms of like the sports sciencey part of this. It is something that I have been like kind of working on behind the scenes too, to get more information. So Nicki, I guess, beat me to it, and she's going to write hers down. But I would, based off what I read from Nicki's story and things I'm able to piece together, and hopefully able to have some conversations over the next couple weeks and how this is all gone. It is something that I am mega paying attention to. Not just because I'm interested in it now, but I want to see how it pays off. Like, if they look fresher and better than their opponents and sharper and all that stuff to start the year, like, this is a data point that matters. Obviously, it can't overcome lack of talent, lack of execution, but I think the point is, like, this stuff helps with execution because you're not tired if you're in shape. And when you're tired, you make mistakes. And that has been a problem, late game execution for them at times over the Rivera era. And they've also started slow, and there's just, it all plays together. So I am very excited to read Nicki's story in the morning on that. All right, half an hour from right now, never read the comments. And, of course, our Pick 6 at 6 coming up at 6 o'clock. We're loaded here on the Team 980. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Your last chance right now to get in your comments for Never Read the Comments on any of our YouTube videos at Craig Hoffman. Of course, we stream live daily here on YouTube as well at the Team 980. Of course, listen on the Team 980, which you can get not only on 980 AM, but if you have an HD radio, go ahead and flip us on in that crystal clear HD FM 106.7 HD2. Also, the Odyssey app, team980.com/listen. Anthony, am I missing any other ways which you can consume this radio program live?
In person, but
that's really just a you and me thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who knows? I would love to do live shows. I will say this. I will say this. If you are a business owner or in a decision-making position at a local business that is public-facing, a restaurant, a bar, a food hall, something like that, or, I mean, frankly, like a car dealer, something where people come into your store and you want us to broadcast live, you also could consume the show in person. We will broadcast live from your place of business. I mean, frankly, Anthony, if someone wants to pay for it, we'd broadcast live from someone's house.
Somebody's house?
If they paid for it, we got costs associated.
I was about to say it's going to be some costs.
I don't know what the purpose of that would be other than to be able to brag to your friends. But if you're rich enough to afford us, I don't even know if you have to be that rich. I don't know what our costs are. If you're rich enough, we're very expensive. We're a luxury product. For us to broadcast live from your house and you would like us to do so just for funsies, find a way to get in touch with you. Go to hoffmanshow.com and drop us a line. I'll connect you with the right salespeople at Odyssey to make that happen. More likely if you're a business owner with an actual business purpose. But if you just want to give us your money, we'll take it, damn it. Because that's the kind of show that we are.
This thing's a great pitch, to be honest.
Could you imagine? Just like
Somebody's gonna call.
super sports fan who likes the show, wants us to come hang out. They got a nice house with a pool. We need an internet connection that's reliable. We need some power. That's pretty much it. And next thing you know, we're going to be like, welcome to the Hoffman Show live from Joey B's house. Who's Joey B? It's my generic person in this scenario. That'd be hilarious.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's one where we're going to have to bring Ant on the road.
I think
someone else is going to have to run the board.
Yep.
Sometimes we go on the road and Ant gets left behind. I'm going to be like, no, where's Altizer at? Where's Eminem at? Hey, you're gonna produce the show today. Anthony and I got to go to someone's house or place of business.
Oh yeah, that too.
Yeah, I love doing live shows, man. I love the crowd. I love feeding off the crowd.
I just love seeing something that's not these, four gray walls. And nothing wrong with these gray walls. But,
yeah, we have a very nice office and studio space.
It's good to switch it up sometimes, though.
Yeah, variety is the spice of life.
Some corporate people, they get to, be in the office, then go outside and, still work from outside. You can switch it up sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, there were days when it would be, and I was doing weekends, and it was so nice outside. And, Anthony, I don't know if you even know this, our corporate office, the building you're in right now, it has a really nice rooftop.
Yep.
I was like, can we just take a Comrex upstairs and do the show from up there? There ain't nobody up there. It'll be quiet. Just let me sit outside. Get some fresh air. The show will be better for it.
Some sun, some good old energy.
Yeah. Some vitamin D. I don't know how fresh the air is in D.C., but theoretically some fresh air. Baseball stadiums out there in the background. Be great. So yeah, if people, this started off as just a kind of, every once in a while it's good to remind folks all the different ways you can listen. And this turned into a whole pitch that if someone would like us to come do the show, to just buy a remote, contact the sales team at Odyssey. There's more information, I'm sure, at the team980.com, or just, if you can go to hoffmanshow.com and go to the contact us page and drop me an email. I'll get it forwarded to the right inbox.
Someone might leave a comment on this exact YouTube page.
That's also true. You can leave one right now on the live stream. I'll click over there in a second. You know, we'll get you connected to the right place, and then we really have come full circle, because Never Read the Comments is next. Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Grinding on a Wednesday.
You ain't lying.
You had an all right day, bro?
I've had a fairly busy day. I had a lot of errands to run. I had some kids I had to help out. I had a day for myself today. Yeah.
Okay. But hey, I just want you to know you've done a great job for the show today. Done a great job on this your day job, if you will. Sometimes all the other stuff feels like it's really adding up.
No fines. It's a good day.
Why did you just
for both of us?
I mean, knock on wood. We certainly hope that continues to be the case. So typically 6 o'clock on Wednesdays is when we hit never read the comments, but during training camp, we are doing our pick 6 at 6. We will keep the pick 6 at 6, which has at 6 in the name, at 6 o'clock. So that is coming up in half an hour. But right now, Anthony Haney, I need you to dig a little deeper through all that grind that you've done today, because we're taking what everyone tells us and for our own good, allegedly, and just chucking it out the window. We're gonna take a dive into the part of the internet where they tell us not to dare. They say, do not, whatever you do, read the comments section. And yet, what do?
Every Wednesday, baby. We read those comments, baby. Let's get it.
Wow. Got the extra let's get it this week. I'm fired up. I'm ready to go. Let's read some comments. You can leave your comments at Craig Hoffman on YouTube on any of the on-demand content for this show or Take Command. Take Command full episodes online for YouTube at 106.7 The Fan. And, of course, we stream live daily at the Team 980. Our guy Blaine watching as usual. He's excited about the Commanders' defense this year. Left that in the chat. You can chat with us during the show as well at the Team 980. But let's start off with some comments on our chat with Mike Sando yesterday, the Athletic senior NFL insider, who had some real questions about Sam Howell, both of his own, and just kind of relayed some questions that other personnel folks around the league have about Howell. If you missed the interview with Sando, 1, it's really good, and you can catch it in all our on-demand platforms. 2, if you're someone who has a lot of optimism inside you, it's probably going to make you pretty mad. And that was predictably what the comments were. Jihad Irish says, which I thought this one was interesting because it was targeted at me, not at Mike. I just asked the questions. But he says, Craig has to be the wet blanket, Sam Howell hater. He claims he isn't, but he leans into the negative side of things heavily. Also, Anthony, I must point out, I must ask this question. Why do people leave comments on my YouTube page like I'm not the one that's going to read them? When you leave a comment on the video, who are you leaving it for? When it's like, Craig does this. I got news for you. Craig doesn't have a gigantic staff of people running his YouTube page. He does it himself. I know because he is me. So, one, I don't know what people, like, why do you think people do that? It's so weird.
Maybe they want to scare other commenters away.
I don't know.
I don't know.
If I was like, hey, Anthony's wearing a great shirt today. Hey, Anthony, that new light we got you makes Anthony look good. Then that'd be weird. But if I was like, hey, man, the shirt, I like that DMV hoop shirt. I'm talking to you. I don't, look, the internet's a weird place. Maybe this is why they say never read the comments. But that is something that is happening more often, which I think is good as we near 3,000 subscribers on the YouTube page, that folks apparently think that we're gigantic and have this big old staff of people that's like combing through the stuff. Nah, it's me. I do it myself. I do my own stunts. Anyway, to the actual point. All I'm doing on Sam Howell is saying what I see. And if that makes me a hater because I don't say things that align with what you want me to say, then I'm a hater. What it actually is, for those of us that live in reality, is I'm an analyst. I tell you what I see, and you are living in fantasy land because you want Sam Howell to be awesome. If I want to be less severe about that, you've got wishful thinking. You're seeing things through burgundy and gold colored glasses. And I'm just realistic about what Howell is at this point in his career in terms of my own observations, that he is inexperienced. He's not killing it in practice, but he's playing he's playing fine. He's playing well even in practice. We won't really know till the game because it's really hard when we're at training camp on the sidelines watching these practices to understand what situations are being repped, what situations, are advantageous to the offense, advantageous to the defense. And sometimes it takes a couple of reps to figure it out. It's like, oh, this is a blitz period. That wasn't just a random blitz on one down. It's like, oh, he's going to look bad for the next 7 snaps. Oh, this is this period. This is that period. Like, he's generally performing as expected, which, when I say as expected, in terms of the higher end of things, he's performing as you'd expect if you think he can grow into something useful this season. That's good. That makes me a hater, then, so be it, I guess. Predictably, though, a lot of the ire on our interview with Sando went towards Sando. Devin Rhodes, 4765 says, good thing these quote-unquote experts are wrong all the time. Who actually cares what they think? No one knows what will happen until it happens. Well, if that's the case, then why do we do any of this? What's the point in having a show and what's the point in talking about sports at the water cooler? That's very silly. And, Mike Sando has been doing this for 20 years. He knows more than a little bit. And more importantly, what he's saying is based off reporting he did where he talked to 50 NFL evaluators. So when Steve 4175 says, never pay attention to national media clowns, high-level writing to get clicks, nothing more, nothing less, no concrete substance in their writing reporting. This dude did a survey of 50 NFL evaluators. Just because you don't like what people say or you don't agree with it or they ultimately are even wrong doesn't mean it's not worth listening to. People need to understand when and when not to listen to people who agree with them. Some things are not really for disagreement and, basic fundamental things. I don't want to go down a quasi-political path here. So I'm going to leave that statement there. But some things are okay to disagree about when we really don't know the answers. We don't know how Sam Howell will be. And so a bunch of NFL people going hey, we didn't really like his tape, doesn't mean that they're wrong. That's their professional opinion. And it's worth listening to versus just ignoring everyone who thinks or doesn't think that he's going to the Hall of Fame. You should have a healthy dose of skepticism. We'll see. It doesn't mean that they're right, but it doesn't mean that you're right either. But talking about it is fun. The ways in which it could go well, the ways in which it could go wrong. That's the whole point of all of this. So calling people clowns and, saying that they're in it for the clicks when you've got incredibly talented people who are well connected around the league doing good reporting on your team is a good way to have that not happen. So, let's not do that. I think this was just a funny aside, Anthony. I think this was on the Benjamin St. Just interview. Someone goes, "Cool beans, man." That was who was that? That was Mr. K Hall 2002. To which Slasher YT says, "No way, my dog said cool beans."
That's all he said was cool beans.
He goes, "Cool beans, man."
Wow.
I thought that was pretty funny. It's a pretty funny. Sometimes the commenters go at themselves. or comment on the comment, and it's the best material on the page. How am I supposed to compete with that?
You can't.
We'll try our best. We had economist J.C. Bradbury on to talk about RFK Stadium as a potential site for the Commanders to return to. Opie Jokey says, build for the community, not for the Commanders. And I think that's true. The question is, what actually is best for the community? And this kind of gets to the heart of the question that I was asking JC and that I think I've been asking overall when it comes to this stadium issue, which is they have to play somewhere. And this is where we ended the interview with JC. The Commanders have to play somewhere, which means you need to build a stadium somewhere. There's a very large part of this community that cares about this team. But ultimately, even of the caring part, there is some percentage of them that will actually go to games and an even smaller percentage that will go to games regularly. Even if they were to build a new stadium, that's a 50,000-seat stadium, and 40,000 of those were sold as season tickets, which would be an insanely high percentage, right? 40,000 people going to 10 games a week. 40,000 out of a metro area of, depending on where you draw the lines, 5 to 8 million people is an absurdly small percentage. Actually, I'll do the math. Let's make it 40,000 of 8 million is 0.005. So that's 0.5% of the entire DC metro area. So the considerations of traffic, the considerations of what goes around the stadium or what could go in the stadium's place, those are the real questions you're trying to ask here, while also accepting that, again, it's got to go somewhere. And that's where I just kind of still go back to the RFK site and go, for fans and folks who want to go to concerts and whatever, location-wise, I don't think you're going to do much better in terms of centralization, in terms of access with public transportation, all of those things. This wasn't a YouTube comment, but I did get a tweet that also made me really think, and I can't believe I didn't think of this myself, because this is an essential question to ask someone like a J.C. Bradbury, this economist from Kennesaw State, who was quoted in Barry's Ferluga story and then joined us earlier this week. Professor Bradbury made the parallel to his own backyard, where the Atlanta Braves have built in Cobb County, Georgia, suburban Georgia, and there was all this economic promise, and none of it has come through. And Bradbury is a guy who studied the economics of stadiums for years, and part of the reason why some of the PR around what a stadium does is BS is because if you were going to go out to dinner and then go to the game, you probably would have gone out to dinner anyway. There actually isn't that much added value of the stadium. And then there's obviously a lot of loss potential, or / there traditionally have been a lot of losses because, now you've got people inside the stadium and not going out doing other things, spending money on other things. There's all the traffic that kind of makes that area moot for a game night event. If you're like a grocery store in that neighborhood, then good luck on a game day with all the extra people. People are not going to go shopping. So it becomes this massive loss despite, and really kind of a shifting of resources from one bucket that you own to another in terms of the tax revenue and things like that. But what this tweeter said that I thought was very good was, and a good point, is if the stadium's built in Virginia, D.C. gets no tax revenue unless there's some kind of potential agreement that funnels through Metro, the main thing that connects both, systematically and literally connects D.C., Maryland, and Virginia, right? They all feed into and get fed by WMATA. But all the tax revenue from the purchase of the land to the upkeep of the stadium and obviously the property and whatever other taxes go on a stadium. Anthony, this will stun you, but I don't own a professional sports stadium, so I actually am not sure of the tax implications. I don't even own a house. I just rent. I don't rent a stadium either. I rent an apartment.
Wow, that is news to me, Craig.
Yeah, stunning.
It truly is.
Stunning. But DC gets none of that. Whatever those tax implications are, DC gets none of it if the stadium's in Virginia or in Maryland. So is it actually a different scenario? Are the economics different? Clearly the answer is yes, but to what extent and in what direction, that I don't know. But it's something that I thought was very, very interesting and a very good point, and something that I don't even know how much you could study because I don't know how many other places deal with this. Obviously, there are stadiums. I guess there are teams that play, quote unquote, outside the jurisdiction that you would think. What happened when the 49ers moved from Candlestick Park to Santa Clara? How did that affect San Francisco City? Assuming that Candlestick was, I think it's just inside the city lines, but I can't remember exactly. My Bay Area geography is not incredible. I've only been there a couple times. But Santa Clara is way south, completely different, city level jurisdiction, and might even be a different county. But certainly, obviously, the state of California gets their share no matter where. The Jets and Giants play in New Jersey, but they haven't played in New York ever, or since the Giants were in the Polo Grounds. So we're talking about, decades and decades and decades ago. But they've been in East Rutherford, New Jersey, and New Jersey getting that money for the main portion of the NFL's booming business era, Super Bowl era, etc. So there's just not a lot of precedent for a team building a stadium in a different state level jurisdiction, and what that means for the tax implications, and thus what it means for the city coffers, to use Mayor Bowser's term. And I think that's a really interesting point that I wish I had better answers on. As for more logistical and emotional level on the RFK versus FedEx versus other options, it's either Mr. Swervon or Miss Wervon. These are the things that you have to consider, Anthony. Is that a Mr. Swervon or MRS Mrs. Wervon? I'm going to probably say it's Mr. Swervon, if I had to guess.
Yeah, I think I would go with the latter.
Anyway, the commenter on the interwebs, said, if fans hate FedEx, they're going to hate RFK. This is not the 80s and 90s. It's a totally different DC. The commute will be worse than FedEx, and there won't be as much parking as FedEx. You go over there and look at the parking. It's not much. I know the metro is there, but that doesn't change anything. Nostalgia does not defeat the demographic and population change in a city. I think this is both a really good point filled with all the wrong details. DC is different now than it was in the 80s and 90s. And we say DC in this particular case. I'm going to say the DMV is very different. The mass migrations in and out of the city by all kinds of different demographic groups, the changing economy of the city, certain parts of town that were one way, served a certain population at one point, gentrified or ignored and have switched, or whatever the different dynamics have been. And obviously there's been more and more people coming to the area in general. But when you talk about the RFK site specifically, the metro is a huge difference. I can tell you right now, as a district resident who lives not far from a metro stop, if I had to go to RFK on a game day, I would 100% take the metro. I will never take the metro to FedEx Field. It's too far, for one. I hate being on the metro that long. When I used to live in Reston, I metroed into the city 3 times, and I was like, I can't do this. I don't need an hour train ride into the city. This is insane. I can drive there in 35 minutes. It becomes incredibly inefficient unless you are at mad rush hour and there's a wreck. So that's part one. It is way more accessible for district residents and, frankly, for a lot of PG County residents that are close to the district on that side of town, on the east side of town. Like for Virginia suburban residents getting there on the metro, you could, but it's a hike. But you could also potentially drive somewhere in the city and take the metro, like a 15, 20-minute metro, and park somewhere else. So that's thing one. Thing two, it's not developed yet. So to look at what is there now and just assume they'll knock down the stadium, build up a new one, and everything that is parking will remain parking, and that's it. That's the end of the construction project, is a severe misunderstanding of what the construction project is. So there would be a lot more parking, and hopefully there would also be a widening / updating of the ins and the outs over there so that there is a better traffic flow pattern than if you just tried to jam 50,000 people into the current RFK site. So I think that the demographic changes, the difference in the city in general is a very, very good point. The specifics about the RFK site compared to the absolute craptastic location that FedEx Field has been since the late 1990s, because some of the things that the Snyders were supposed to do and were supposed to work on with the county and the city and the state never came to fruition. Yeah, I would say that the RFK site's would be an upgrade if that were to come to fruition. But we'll see. We will see. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980 every single weekday, 4 to 7. Wednesdays. Never read the comments. Make sure you get your comments in at Craig Hoffman on YouTube. Of course, watching it live at the Team 980. And occasionally we also read some comments from Take Command, which you can catch in full at 1067 The Fan on YouTube and your favorite podcast app. When we get back here live on the radio, we will, we'll check the time. Oh, it'll be 6 o'clock, meaning it's time for our training camp 6 at 6 on the Team 980. Oh, thought we were finished? No, we got one more hour. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Tomorrow, more training camp coverage, of course, here on the show. Same thing for Friday. We are in the thick of it, as they say. Whoever the hell they are. They said it. It's true. We're in the thick of it. Dog days of training camp. And then next week, bro, we got a preseason game to get ready for. Anthony, pop quiz. When is the first preseason game?
What did you say?
When is the next or the first preseason game?
The first preseason game is next Friday.
That is correct. Dun-dun-dun-dun.
I did not know that. I completely guessed,
Dun-dun-dun-dun.
and it was a good guess.
Yeah, it was a good guess. Yeah, it's next Friday, 7:30 kickoff. So we're basically the pregame show. I do believe that Logan and I will be doing the pregame show again on this station.
Oh, it's not.
But
All
not next Friday because Logan's on the broadcast.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Forget about that.
Okay.
Mr. Chick, Logan, and B Mitch on the television broadcast.
I did see those three out there, figuring out names, who's going to be doing what, and yep.
Yeah, so those three guys will be crushing it. So it'll be good. Maybe we'll have Logan on from Cleveland on Friday before he gets into the TV stuff. So I'll have that conversation with him. We did record a great edition to Take Command. That might even be out now, honestly. I don't know if Nick's put it up yet. But recapping the first couple of days of camp. So if you want that, have some patience, please. We're doing a live radio show. But it's 7 o'clock. By all means, go ahead and listen. Right now, though, just after 6 o'clock on a training camp practice day means it is time to pick the 6 most interesting things from training camp and put them together. Our observations, best sound, the whole deal. Our training camp, pick 6 at 6. Yeah. Off we go. All right, Anthony, the referees were there today. Oh, yeah. It's really quite funny because they had one of the crews out there. I can't remember the ref's name, but like one of the guys, you're like, oh yeah, I know you from TV. And they're calling the holding and stuff. And first flag they throw in practice, and they're going through their training camp too. He goes to the crowd, stands there, gets in his referee stance. Oh, that was a good false start call. Offense, very very kind of pointed motion, on the offense. Very very, I don't want to call it fluid. Very strict motion. Very professional. Very crisp. And that's great. And it's like, yeah, I also pretty sure that you're one of my least favorite referees because your crew calls everything. Relatively speaking, a clean practice. There were definitely some penalties, some PI calls here, some holding calls there. There was a defensive holding at one point. But the funniest thing from the officials being out there today, well, the main thing too, I'll be serious-ish for a moment. Rivera was asked about the officials being out there. He gave a big long spiel about how it's not just about keeping the players honest on what's a penalty and what's not, but as the rules get tweaked and updated, it allows players to go to the officials and say, like, hey, what actually happened on my technique there? Why did you call that a penalty? So they get a lot more clarity than they can in the middle of a game. And they also do presentations in the meeting rooms and things like that to the players. So very, very helpful and an essential part of training camp. But the funniest thing, Anthony, happened it was probably like 3/4 of the way through practice. They're in a red zone drill. The one offense is out there. Actually, it might have been the twos. Either way, there was a play that had multiple penalties, and the referees came together for like your classic referee huddle. The kind of thing that stops the game for 3 minutes, and you are like, what are we doing? There's got to be a better way to do this. But remember, this is Commanders practice with Eric Bieniemy. EB's got a tempo to practice, and he does not want that tempo to be messed with by anyone. And so they get their little huddle, And as they're huddling up and discussing, and Ron's kind of hovering around the hash mark, the referees are close to us on the sideline, and Ron's waiting like, what the hell's going on with the call here? EB's already sending in the next play. So huddle breaks, like the offensive huddle, as the referee huddle also breaks. And the ref is like kind of telling Ron what happened on the play. And the umpire goes and runs in and like stops the play. And is like, hold on, the referees are not set yet. And as the refs were huddling, I turned to Nicki, Jhabvala, and was like, you think EB will yell at the refs? Like, he's yelling at all the players to get off the field, to keep the tempo, do all that stuff. Is he gonna yell at the refs? And not 5 seconds later, EB looks at the refs and goes, get the out of there. Tell us what it is later. We gotta go. Not quote unquote, but that was the general sentiment. 48 had the quote. I got close enough, right?
Yeah, you were really close.
Yeah, there was definitely a get the bleep out of there, get the bleep out of the way. And it was I wish there was a way that I could recreate for the YouTube, the streaming audience, what the referee's face looked like and describe it for the radio audience. But it was just kind of dumbfounded. Like, the referee was like almost offended because he was like, how dare you? Let us do our job. We're the referees. And it was like, nah, man, this is our practice. You ain't in charge of this. Get the hell out the way. And it was just watching the power dynamic shift in real time because the referee was like offended and wanted to reprimand Bieniemy, but what could he do? You're visiting their practice, man. Get the out of the way. And man, that was funny. I enjoyed that. From EB. All right, that's number one. Referees at practice. EB was ready to kill them. Number two. This we talked about with Nicki, Jhabvala earlier, and we'll definitely continue to talk about this as we come to better understand the impact. But the structure of practice remains a very, very interesting thing that is just very, very different than anything that I've ever seen before in the teams that I've covered, but is, I would say, more common, obviously, in other places, obviously Kansas City being one of them. Much more intense in terms of play volume, much longer periods with a lot more reps on the same stuff, just a lot more plays being run, which is the Bieniemy influence. Ron Rivera talked about it before practice today.
Well, I think one of the things that we've done, Nicki, more than anything else is, we've instead of having, as many periods as we had, we've limited some days where we've only had 4 action periods. Today we'll have 6, but we've had some where we've only gone 4, but we've spent more time. When we did 9-on-7 yesterday, we spent more time on specifically 9-on-7. Sometimes when we get into the 7-on-7 stuff, we'll spend more time on third down situations, whether third and short, third and medium, third and long. Instead of just going through and getting, hey, we're going to get 10, we'll focus in, and that 15 or 20 minutes would be dedicated specifically to that. So instead of bouncing from one to the other, like today, we'll do a few more. We'll add a couple extra action periods as opposed to just having 4, because there are some things that he just wants to touch on. So those are things that we've talked about in terms of the way he's structured practice.
I love this so much because it allows for depth, and that depth leads to a detailed understanding and higher levels of execution. So often training camp, one, it's monotonous as hell. Like when Gruden was here, I knew the structure of practice for that year by day 2. It's like, okay, they're going to do this, then they're going to do that, then they're going to do this, then they're going to do that, and then they're going to do this, and they're going to finish in 2 minutes, and then we'll have our free-for-all for interview scrums. Like, it just was the same thing every single day for years and years and years, and it's kind of this little bit of everything approach. And what Bieniemy is doing, and what Andy Reid must do, and what other coaches, Nicki said that when she covered the Broncos, Gary Kubiak was like this, is we might not do everything every day. You might not see a particular situation or a type of drill for a couple of days, but when you see it, we're going to do it for 20 minutes. You're going to get a ton of reps, And so the rep count winds up being the same over the course of camp. Well, one, this rep count is higher because they run more plays with the tempo and intensity that they bring to the 2.5 hour practice. But generally speaking, it's kind of the same volume over the course of camp because you get it all in one day, more concentrated versus just a little bit every day. I would rather say, all right, let's do this, make a quick tweak, a quick fix, do it again, quick tweak, quick fix, do it again, positive feedback, do it again, positive feedback. All right, we nailed it. We really know it. We'll come back to it in a couple days. And now we're starting on step 3 versus step 1 versus we're just going to go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And you just never get the depth because it feels like you're just checking a box every single day. I love the way they're structuring practice now. It makes sense in every part of my brain. And you can read Nicki's story on it tomorrow morning in the Washington Post, or maybe this afternoon in the Washington Post, whenever her editor is done with it, WashingtonPost.com/sports. And if you missed Nicki talking about it earlier in the show, rewind on the free Odyssey app to the 5 o'clock segment. Before practice today, Rivera spoke before practice today. I wonder if he had a meeting with Harris after practice because obviously they're working through a lot of stuff with the new ownership group, and Harris was back on campus today, if you will. But Ron was asked about Sam Howell, and in the middle of the answer, he slipped in the other guy, and I wonder why. But the question more directly was, how should other people outside the building be looking at Sam Howell at this point in camp?
Well, I think it's to me is right now this is all the growth and development opportunity. This is a chance to learn the base fundamentals of our offense, and he's been doing it since OTAs and minicamp. Now we're in training camp. We're in our 8th day now. So all these things are coming together. What you really need to look for is when we get on the field. When we do game plan, when we do prepare. I know it's just preseason games, but those are going to be paramount to telling everybody where he is, what's his growth. And at the same time, as I've said don't sleep on Jacoby. He's done a nice job as well. I mean, we got some really good quarterback play going on right now. We've got a really good quarterback room. We're very happy with what we've got right now. And again, we just want to continue to see the growth. So now when we go into those meetings and I listen to Eric and I listen to Vita talk about what he's doing, how he's doing it, and listen to Luke and his opinion and Kenny Zampese. I mean, we got 4 guys really dedicated to the development of the one position. I think that's real, that's a good start for us. And I think it's been a good start for him in camp.
Don't sleep on Jacoby. This is a thing that many coaches do that is incredibly annoying. And I don't know where it comes from. I think part of it is like a competitiveness and trying to create competition. Part of it is a fairness thing. Part of it is just a kind of a reality that the margins in the NFL between like good players and starters and bench guys are not that wide. And so if you ask about the starter, especially like if we're talking about Howell and Brissett, obviously they're pretty neck and neck in terms of ability. Why do you assume that we just care about Sam? Like we care about Jacoby too, or at other positions, you start bringing up other guys. You ask about Cole Turner, you're going to get Curtis Hodges in the answer. Like these are the kinds of things that coaches do. Jay used to do it all the time. You wind up listing like 10 receivers and you're like, cool, man, you're keeping 5 or 6. And we definitely know who 4 of them are. But to do it at the quarterback position at this point in camp, I would say it's worth an eyebrow raise if it's the kind of thing that Rivera didn't just do all the time. And I guess I don't read too much into it in terms of like that actually means there's an open competition or anything like that. But I do think the larger point he makes at the end and like the resources they have dedicated to quarterback is interesting and cool. And they have a lot of voices in the room. They have a guy in Kenny Zampese who was with Sam last year. They obviously have Pritchard, the new quarterbacks coach, who's thick with EB and thinks about the game the same way. Was EB's kind of handpicked guy. Bieniemy has had a big role in Patrick Mahomes' career and now comes here as the OC and is very, very involved in all the details. Has a lot of side conversations with Sam and Jacoby. You can see it on the field in practice, and I'm sure he's in their meeting room a ton. So there's a lot of interesting stuff there. and obviously Ron's focused on the growth and the trajectory of how more than he is like the present. But I found it a little minorly interesting, worth enough to play to let you hear it for yourselves, that he, in a question very distinctly about Sam Howell and the unique position Sam is in as a young player who is a starter despite what a lot of other people think should be happening here, that he felt the need to slide in Jacoby Brissett's name. Hoffman Show, we're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app just after 6 o'clock, meaning we're in the middle of our Pick 6 at 6, where we pick the 6 most interesting things from the day at Commanders training camp. The defense, it looked really good, specifically the first-team defense when they have those 4 first-rounders out there on the defensive line. John Allen, Deron Payne, Montez Sweat, Chase Young. There's a cohesiveness. There is a confidence to what they do, a decisiveness, and frankly, in a lot of reps, a dominance to what they do. John Allen's day at the podium today, how have they gotten to that point? What is it about being in year 4 together that makes everybody so comfortable?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you don't have to spend a lot of time with a lot of the basics. And what I mean that is, we know the plays, we know what we're supposed to do. Now we can really pay attention on how we have to do it, as opposed to going into the first year, we're all learning something new, so we have to spend more time focusing on what to do first. You know, I feel like we have a good understanding of what we're trying to do, but now we can really fine-tune on how we're going to accomplish that.
There's a great saying, methods are many, principles are few. Methods don't always last, principles always do. You got that, Anthony? You got my motto of life there?
I need you to say it one more time.
Yeah. Methods are many, principles are few. Methods don't always last, principles always do.
Is that poetic?
I mean, it kind of was. I think it's more well-written prose than technically
poetry.
Oh,
okay. I wasn't sure if that was what you were getting at.
The point is,
yes,
that they understand the principles of this defense. There are certain rules and kind of guiding guardrails that say this is how we play. We're trying to accomplish these things. The methods by which they do that, the actual technique, and not technique like they're taught to rush a certain way, hand placements, whatever. But are we going to bull rush? Are we going to use stunts, twists? All those kinds of things can change, but they still have to accomplish the principles of the system. We, stop the ball or stop the run on the way to the quarterback. We keep contain. We don't want to let or be in certain. We don't ever want to be -2 in the run game based off alignment or like whatever. I don't actually know their principles. Jack Del Rio would have to lay them out, and I don't think he wants that necessarily out there because some of them are kind of specific. But they're all big picture things that every iteration of blitz, every iteration of rush, every iteration of coverage has to check the boxes of. And I think to hear John talk about that is interesting, that they all have such a fundamental understanding of the principles at this point that they can continue to fine-tune the methods. They can continue to fine-tune the details of how they want to rush on it in certain situations, how they play off of each other, and maybe even get, we hear about the offensive creativity of like, oh, Mahomes and Kelsey go and have a creative period where they can come up with their own plays and then bring them back to Andy Reid. I don't think that you can invent too many new ways to rush the passer in the NFL, but who knows? Like, as long as every job is covered and you make your teammate right, like, there's some stuff that might happen that they didn't exactly draw up. They kind of fall into. But if you understand the larger picture of what you're trying to accomplish, obviously that gives you more freedom. And I think that is one of the things that John's talking about, along with continuity and all these things that are good for this defense in year 4 together. Thing number 5 in our training camp, pick 6 at 6. The tight ends, I think, are having a very, very good camp. Logan Thomas has been excellent. And Cole Turner has also really started to flash. A big old number 85. Very tall number 85. Very tall, yet defense can't seem to find him sometimes. He's running open down the field. And he credits Eric Bieniemy with what he's brought schematically to get his position group more involved this season.
Yeah, we're getting a lot more options this year as far as targets, and we're a lot more involved in the pass game. So, it's fun and it's exciting, and every single day there's something new going in, and, a little creative, something that we're not used to before. So, it's fun. It's fun to be a part of this offense.
By the way, success, ball distribution, all fun. Running a ton of plays so everybody gets touches, super fun. And we'll see when they get into games if they can keep that tempo and run a bunch of plays and convert first downs and all that kind of stuff. But right now, keeping everybody happy through training camp, there's enough balls to go around, and Bieniemy's done a great job of getting a bunch of different guys easy looks in space. And that's something Ron talked about this morning as well, was our whole point of bringing EB here was to get the ball quicker to our playmakers in space, and Bieniemy's very clearly done a good job through camp in doing that. And obviously looking at the Kansas City offense, seems like they know how to do it during the regular season as well. And last but not least, the sixth observation, the sixth thing that we picked to talk about from training camp in our pick 6 at 6 was that the first fight was picked today. Didn't last very long. It was about 4 seconds, maybe. A couple punches thrown. Nick Gates, Cody Barton, 2 new guys getting into it on, I think it was the second play of the first 11-on-11 period today. And I would just say, Anthony, if you had odds on who would be the first guy to throw a punch in training camp, I don't think that those who bet the favorite would be making much money, but they would have made money because the favorite definitely would have been Nick Gates.
Yeah, I agree. It would have been somebody in the trenches.
I don't know if it would have been a 2-to-1 favorite, but you weren't getting more than 3 or 4-to-1 odds on Nick Gates being the first guy.
But I will say, if there were odds on the first person or people to get punched, probably be a Montez Sweat, just because he loves talking.
Yeah, Montez and Chase do love to talk a lot.
Yeah, they do
Chase
a lot
was
of
talking a lot today.
That's what I'm saying. So if I was a betting man and I had to guess who, I probably would have said one of those guys.
Yeah, that would have been a good one. Barton, chippy, linebacker. See a David Mayo.
But David Mayo, yep. He would have been another person up there.
Milo Eifler, some of those linebackers get into it. Third-team guys, second-team guys. But nope, it was Barton and Gates. Little scrap-a-doodle. It was over quickly. It was fine. See what happens tomorrow as temperatures continue to rise. And actually, it was another day where it wasn't that bad. It got a little spicy towards the end, but really, they've been fairly lucky outside of last Friday and Saturday. It's supposed to heat back up a little bit next week. But actually, Saturday is the hottest. Oh, no, Monday is the high of 92. But you're talking, overnight in the high 60s, highs in the high 80s. It's pretty damn good for this time of year, man.
Great football weather, baby.
Phenomenal. Get out there. God, how many 100-degree days did I have in Richmond back in the day? Brutal. Just existing sucked. Now you get to watch some good ball, not too hot, and, less ornery folks, less fights. Fights are bad in training camp. You don't want them. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on Team 980. That is our pick 6 at 6. Coming up next, Terry McLaurin gave one of the best interviews I have ever heard to Ryan Clark and his crew at The Pivot. We'll play you some of the best of and talk about it next here on the Team 980. It's the Hoffman Show, Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. So, had the chance to listen to a lot of podcasts over the last couple of days because, you know, when you're driving an hour out to training camp to and fro, there's a lot of time, obviously, listening to Sheehan and everybody on the drive, to Rooster on the drive home, which is fun. But I am a big podcast guy, and so I had heard that Terry McLaurin was on the Pivot podcast, and it was very, very good. And Terry's a guy that does not do a ton of interviews, and obviously he's the best player on the team that I cover. So I figured, I was like, let me check this out. Also, he's one of the most interesting guys that I've gotten to know over the years doing this. And what Ryan Clark and Channing Crowder and Fred Taylor have built at the Pivot is a place where athletes go and are incredibly honest and vulnerable. And they have real conversations, like human conversations, the kind of conversations that you do not typically get on the record, period. Like, I've been lucky enough to get to know players well enough where we'll have these kinds of conversations on the side, and you talk about life and you get to know them a little bit. And create a deeper understanding. And rarely, you know, you get a guy who's like ready to share his story. I think a lot of people remember when I covered the team, and like Capri Bibbs was like, I want people to know my story. And so he was willing to talk. I got to know, I mean, even a superstar like Josh Norman, I got to know him well enough that, like, Josh and I had some pretty real conversations into microphones over the years. But Terry, I think, revealed a lot more in this conversation about himself and a number of subjects that, and some of them are just time-based. He hasn't talked about them. For instance, the new ownership group. So there's football, but there's also some deeper life stuff that you just don't hear athletes talk like this. And I think it's really important. And I want you to hear from him. And I also want you to know why I think it's incredibly important. But we'll start with the football stuff and start with the ownership group and the investment, not just financially, but emotionally, that Terry has seen from Josh Harris and company. Again, this is from the Pivot podcast with Ryan Clark, Channing Crowder, and Fred Taylor.
Now we're stepping into where I've got to meet Josh Harris. I've gotten to meet Mr. Blitzer. I've gotten to meet Magic Johnson and Mr. Ein and Mr. Mitchell, all these guys. And I'm just like, wow, like, it's something about when people got skin in the game. You know what I mean? Like, it's bigger than just the dollars. We understand it's a business. We all played. But, like, there's a bigger purpose, what I've gotten from those guys, of why they're here and why they want to see that prominence go back to what it was, because they grew up fans of the Art Monks, the Darryl Greens, the golden days, you know what I mean? And they want to bring that back to this city. The fans deserve that. And for me as a leader, I want to continue to be someone they could be proud of, not on the field, only on the field with how I play, the competitiveness, the fire, the leadership, but who I am in the community. I love the people in this community, the opportunities I've gotten to have camps and do certain give backs, and the way I've been embraced, because I think the platform that we have can be used one of two ways, but I choose to try to bring light and positivity to the people in this community the best way I can.
When he talks about the ownership having the skin in the game and what it means to him as a leader, it's not, look, everything, just because people say good stuff about this group doesn't mean it's inherently meant as a shot at Dan, but there's also a obvious contrast of what we're talking about here. Dan was in this for Dan, and at times the interests of Dan and the interest of the team and what's actually best for the team would intertwine and good things would happen. But there is something to doing something for not yourself, for doing something for what feels like a higher power. And that could mean spiritually if you're a religious person or a spiritual person, but it also just could be your community. A community, by definition, is something bigger than yourself. You're doing this for others and for a collective. And to hear the passion Terry spoke about this with, and to hear Josh Harris last week go, like, I'm sweating this. I am nervous. Like, I have had a lot of sleepless nights. I do not want to mess this up. Shows the importance of the emotional investment here, and that they will take the time to do things right because it means something to them beyond their own personal glory. And to see that alignment from ownership down to star player, and then hopefully from star player down to the rest of the roster, I think is really, really special. And I don't know if that's something that will be, I expect Josh Harris to be a good owner for as long as he owns the team and to be smart and all of that kind of stuff. But there is something about the urgency of the moment right now that is a unique, special moment in time. And I am fascinated to see what happens with it. I'm fascinated to see the continued fan response for it. But to have a guy like Terry McLaurin who sees and understands that, I think is also special. And we are very lucky in DC in that way, in my opinion, to have him. Now, when Terry talks about the team overall, there is also something that he mentions that I think is really important. And when I have talked about the kinds of people that make up the organization in the past, there are inevitably comments about, I don't care as long as they win. And what I try to tell people, despite what I would consider a very toxic response in that it's about just winning, is that the two are tied. There is inevitably a short-termism in bad people succeeding, because the bad stuff will ultimately lead to them failing. Good people is the way to build an organization, because it means you are sustainable. And if you don't ask me, just ask Terry McLaurin.
I think the first thing you touched on was the people. We have a good group of people from top to bottom in this organization where the mission, the mindset is all in the same direction. And I think if we can cultivate an atmosphere where there's unselfishness, where I think it's hard to do that in NFL because everybody wants theirs, whether it's contract, whatever it is, you know what I mean, success, accolades. I think I've noticed, and even with my journey at Ohio State, where you gain more through the selflessness. You gain more with putting yourself on the side and putting all you can in for the team. And I think EB breathes that. I think Coach Rivera has breathed that since he got here. I think the defensive and their staff, they breathe that as well. And I think the ownership breathes that. And so I think we finally have a synergy to where we got everything moving in the right direction. We got the right people in the right places. We got, we're really good at all, like really significant positions. And we got a young quarterback who sometimes when you don't know, that could be a good thing. Because, you know what I mean? You're not playing with that pressure. You're not playing with these expectations. I'm sure he has those, but he's surrounded by so many great people who are there to support him and be there for him. That's all I've ever wanted, is to have a quarterback who believes in me to the point where, like, I see one hot man, give me one of these. Give me one of these and let's rock, you know?
Obviously, morality and goodness and kindness and empathy are not replacements for talent. Don't get that twisted. That is not what anybody worth listening to would tell you. But also don't let talent be a replacement for kindness and empathy and morality and everyone ultimately pushing in the same direction. We've seen many, many talented teams that are undercut by whether it's personality clashes or tactical clashes because there's a disconnect somewhere about how to pull together in the right direction. And I think what is encouraging about how this team has been built now, and I think there are massive questions about what the hell took so long, and there's a lot of questions about quarterback decisions along the way. This is not a sign-off on everything that Rivera and Mayhew and company have done for 4 years. It just is a endorsement, tepidly at least, of where they are right now, is that they have good people. They have put a premium on character that has allowed them to build a culture that gets the best out of people. And so the goodness and the kindness and the empathy and the supportiveness and all of that actually elevates the talent. And I think that is a really special thing, that hopefully they have enough talent and enough know-how to pull it together into actual winning football this year. But there is, I find it genuinely annoying, not just because it's meat-headed or toxic or whatever words you want to use, but because it's wrong when people just assume that that stuff doesn't matter. Which brings us to the most serious and real human portion of Terry McLaurin's sit down with the Pivot, where he talks about therapy and Terry's journey with it over the last couple of years. Now, Terry has been outwardly a model citizen since he's gotten here. He has always been great with the media. He has always been great in the community. He has always said the right things. He has been a vocal leader at times. He has been led by example at all times throughout his career. But sometimes he was doing that in public, and public is a variety of places here, not just in like when there's cameras and microphones, but in the locker room, etc. And then at home, he was a mess by his own admission. And it got to a point that he realized he needed help.
You know, my girl does something, or something so little, the dog spills his food or whatever, you blow up. You mad. You know what I mean? You angry over some of the littlest stuff. And I just started to learn, I had to learn how to not only process my feelings, but then check in with myself. Okay, what does that mean for me? And then how do I not have those same reactions going forward? How do I have these hard conversations about certain things I'm going in my life with people who I truly love and care about? And so therapy really allowed me to release a lot of the baggage and expectations with myself and allow me to truly define who I really am. What's my purpose? What do I do? And I think you find sometimes you go through all your life trying to fill it with voids or fill it with women, drugs, alcohol, whatever it may look like for everybody. And you look up and it's just an empty feeling. It's like you pouring into a glass with no bottom at the end. You're not being filled up with the right things. And so when I started to learn how to hold emotional conversations and be honest and hold myself to a higher standard of, okay, this person either said something that bothered me or I've done something that's bothered someone, there's ways to handle it other than shut down. I'll shut down. I walk away, F the world, F everybody, I'm going by myself. You know what I'm saying? Because at the end of the day, I know my fear was being disappointed or being hurt by somebody else. But in return, I'm shutting myself off from true connection.
I would encourage everyone to listen to this entire interview. If you're listening to this show, you probably are a Commanders fan. You probably like Terry McLaurin. The cross-section of people that don't, thanks for listening, I guess. I just don't know. I don't know who it is that you are. And I think this interview is so important because I think there are people that will listen that need to get help that will get it. Because when people like Terry McLaurin, who is seen as tough, who is seen as like this physical specimen and like the kind of pinnacle of masculinity, he's an NFL football player. He's tough, he's fast, and he's competitive, and he'll get in your face. And like when it is time to make a freaking play, Terry McLaurin is the guy. On this podcast, in another part, they talk about the fact that in Indianapolis last year, with the game on the line, it was Terry versus a future Hall of Famer in Stephon Gilmore, a former Defensive Player of the Year, and Terry went up and beat him. It doesn't get any more classically masculine than that. Mano y mano, and I won. The ball was in the air, and it was mine. And if Terry can go to therapy and talk about it, so can you. So can I. So can anybody else. Which is good, because the world would frankly be a better place if more people went to therapy. And the lack of fear he has to talk about these things, in part, comes because people, like, who's going to step to Terry McLaurin and tell him that he's soft because he went to therapy? But the thing I appreciate is that both in talking about it and in kind of the subject matter of what he's talking about, is he comes to a truth that I believe with my whole heart and my whole mind and my whole soul, which is that vulnerability is strength. Vulnerability is not weakness. There's this thought that, like, we can't talk about our emotions. We can't talk about our feelings, specifically as men. And I assume that based off demographics, I'm talking mostly now to men. And what I would ask you is, what's harder, talking about it or not? And most people would say, what's harder is talking about it. Well, then doing that takes strength. And that's what Terry realized. And that's what Terry lives. And that's what Terry preaches. And so, yeah, there are people that certainly will try to mock this segment and, mock a praise of Terry on this subject, or maybe even, hear about Terry McLaurin. I don't know what people do. I don't know what causes people to have that mindset. But I do know it comes from weakness. I do know it comes from insecurity. And if Terry McLaurin can do what he's done in going and getting the work, when, by the way, everyone looks at him already as a model citizen, and then talk about it, what's anyone else's excuse? That's an interview that's going to help people. And I appreciate Terry and Ryan and Channing and Fred a lot for doing it. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. There was another clip from this interview that was one of the funniest things I heard all day. I was driving down on 267 on the way to practice, and I laughed out loud in my car at this bite from Terry McLaurin on the pivot. That will be where we go in Real Things, as well as a very funny interview with Travis Kelce next on the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app.
Here's what's trending on the Team 980.
Suspensions at Iowa State. 7 athletes, and it's actually worse than suspensions. 7 athletes have been charged for the gambling sting at Iowa and Iowa State. Ex-Hawkeyes basketball player Aaron Eulis and current Cyclones quarterback Hunter Deckers, the ones with the highest profiles. Each is accused of tampering with records related to an Iowa criminal division investigation into sports gambling at the 2 schools. That is what's trending. I'm Craig Hoffman on the Team 980.
Real things.
We're not going to be sucked this year.
Real people.
5 and 11, not very good.
Said into real microphones.
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
Anthony, you make your threes with your fingers in the weirdest way. And it always confuses me because you do the... Melo did the...
Melo does this.
Yeah, the
Russell Westbrook does this.
You got the Russell Westbrook.
Oh, no. Dirk Nowitzki did it first, but Russ copied him and head tapped his head when he...
Yeah, but like when you hold that up as a time cue for me of when I need to end the show, if your thumb is not fully like on the screen properly, I see a 2. So like that would be more helpful, but that's a 3. Got it. All right, so we got basically 2 minutes left in the show. I promised one more funny, non-serious bite from Terry McLaurin on the Pivot podcast. They were talking about spirituality, and faith, which was a very, very interesting conversation. Then Terry dropped this in the middle. Does God have favorites?
I don't really pray for wins and losses because those come and go. And sometimes, I don't know, when you see dudes like Steph Curry, you know what I mean, hitting hole-in-ones and the best shooter all the time, you're like, do God got favorites? You know what I'm saying? LeBron, they got favorites, you know?
So funny. Again, that podcast is really good. Definitely check it out. That was funny. Also funny, our guy Andrew Siciliano giving Travis Kelce a hard time about a story you may have heard about.
The thing anyone really wants to talk about is Taylor Swift. Did you really?
Hey, man,
Did you really have your phone number ready on a friendship bracelet to give to Taylor Swift?
I said what I said, and I meant what I said when I said it.
You shot your shot, huh,
and you know what? It is what it is. I'm not going to talk about my personal life. I know what you writers want to hear, and you want to hear more about that, and I'm not going to give you anything.
Has she reached out?
Huh?
Has she reached out?
And that's going to wrap it up here with NFL.
Oh, wait. He didn't say no, though.
That's good from Kelce. And that's going to wrap it up. By the way, Anthony, have you seen Kelce's new look?
Yeah, and I'm not digging it. He cut off his entire beard.
Yeah, he went from
and kept the stash.
Yeah, he went from a very dapper-looking gentleman with his full beard situation to a mustachioed man. He just looks a lot older now. I don't know. It's a very interesting look. We'll have a full coverage of Travis Kelce's new look tomorrow on The Hoffman Show.
The Hoffman